What's going on, everyone? It is the Derf, and today I am bringing you an absolutely overpowered Arc Hunter build. This build gives you excellent ability regen, tons of orbs of power, a regenerating super of up to and well under 1 minute, and just an absolute powerhouse as far as dealing with ads, dealing with champs, and literally just wrecking the battlefield with virtually very little effort. If you've been looking for a Arc Hunter build that takes advantage of one of the best supers in the entire game, as well as amazing ability regen and uptime, this is the build for you. If you do know anyone that could use a great Hunter build that loves Arc, or maybe is just looking for a new build for their Arc Hunter, please send them my way. If you do find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Want to give a shout out to my subscribers as well as my members. I couldn't do all of this without your support and good vibes, and I really do appreciate all the feedback that you guys give me. It helps keep me going, helps keep me innovative, and always thinking about ways to improve and give you guys more builds that you can use virtually anywhere. So I'm going to take you through, I'm going to show you how powerful this is, and then I'm going to break it down in a more generalized setting so that you guys can see how the gameplay loop can unfold. And once you get used to it, then you can work yourself into harder content like what you see on the screen right here. And oh, by the way, just in case you were wondering, how did this final scorecard look? I've got a picture of it right here. So without further ado, let's get on into it. Alright, so the Arc Strider Hunter subclass. The super of choice, of course, is going to be Gathering Storm. The abilities, whichever you want for your class ability and your triple jump is what I prefer, or you could use Blink if you prefer. The Marksman Dodge is also what I prefer, so I can quickly reload my weapon. But if you did want to do the Gambler's Dodge, if you want to punch a little bit more often, that is fine too. For the melee ability, Disoriented Blow is what I have selected. The reason being is that it blinds the target and amplifies you at the same time and grants you Bolt Charge. Now that is not to say that Combination Blow is bad, but I like the blinding effect and the fact that it amplifies you right away. And blind targets, specifically unstoppable champions, are stunned. The Flashbang Grenade is my grenade of choice. Another way to stun unstoppable champions is the reason that I have this one selected. For aspects, Flow State is number 1 on this list. Defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. While you are amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly, you are more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. So this is a twofer. You get a bonus to any time that you are amplified, and if you do defeat a jolted target, you automatically get amplified, and that's going to be important when we take a look at the weapons. The second aspect is going to be Ascension, propelling yourself upward and creating a burst of energy around you that amplifies allies and jolts targets. So you get a twofer on this one as well. First up, you get 3 fragment slots, which is great. You can use this to build your character the way that you want to without having to sacrifice too much versus using a prismatic build. And secondly, it jolts the targets and then amplifies your allies at the same time. So a jolted target, specifically overload champions, become stunned. For fragments, Spark of Discharge is number 1 on the list. Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to generate an Ionic Trace. Collecting an Ionic Trace grants you a stack of Bolt Charge. I want as many Ionic Traces as possible, and you're going to see this throughout. Spark of Ions is next up. Defeating a jolted target, defeating a target with Bolt Charge creates an Ionic Trace. Yet again, a way to get another Ionic Trace. Spark of Amplitude, rapidly defeating targets while you are amplified, creates an Orb of Power. You're going to be amplified practically at all times during the heat of battle. So the ability to create orbs of power to further increase your ability regen is going to be pivotal. Spark of Brilliance is next up on the list. Defeating a blinded target with precision damage creates a blinding explosion. Plus 10 intellect. I don't really care about the intellect, but the big key here is defeating a blinded target with the precision damage. We're going to be using weapons where that's going to be entirely possible. So whether or not you switch out certain weapons, which I'll get to, you should still be able to trigger a blinding explosion. And yet again, a blinding explosion stuns unstoppable champions. Last but not least, Spark of Resistance. While you're surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. This is a no-brainer. You're going to be zipping around the battlefield rapidly. I mean, amplified, I guess I should say. The plus 10 to strength is nice because I want to get my melee back faster, and having that little extra buffer when you are surrounded by enemies, specifically I'm thinking like harder content and things like that, you're going to want to make sure you have as much resistance as possible. For stat distribution, I recommend trying to round yourself out as evenly as possible with the focus specifically on resilience and grenade discipline. The reason I say you need to be well-rounded is you have to have relatively close cooldowns to your abilities. And with the Arc Strider, you want to make sure that your dodge, your melee, and your grenade have relatively similar recharge rates. Now the dodge you're not really going to be as concerned with because the cooldown is approximately 30 seconds. But the grenade and the melee are just north of 1 minute flat. So to try to mitigate the differences and when you get your abilities back, you want to try to have them somewhere around a T6 or a T7. But resilience is number one on this because you are going to be getting to enemies faster than anyone who is not running an arc class. So just something to consider when you are focusing your armor and deciding how to mod your stats. For weapons, in the kinetic slot, I recommend going with a fusion rifle. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying you are going to have to decide how to mod your weapons based on the activity of choice. If we're just going to go off of, like, let's just say Nightfall, right now it's unstoppable and barrier. So you need a way to be able to stun unstoppable champions, and you need a way to be able to stun barrier champions in order to be as effective as possible for your team. So what I recommend is putting on a fusion rifle. But if you did want to switch this out for a barrier piercing option, you can put on Breachlight or you can put on Mikkel's Reverence. If you are confident in how quickly you can generate orbs of power, you can put on a Rufus's Fury or virtually any other strand option, and those will be able to pierce barriers based on picking up an orb of power with the artifact. But you're going to have to decide what's best for you. How I have it right now, you can take this directly into the Nightfall, and you can get from start to finish virtually effortlessly. But again, you're going to have to decide how you want to build into this art class. I recommend putting on Vantage Point as your main ad clear. The reason for it is that jolting feedback is simply just a nice thing to have. Being able to stun targets, having eddy current is also a good perk. But if you did switch out your fusion rifle for the scatter signal and put on something that's more ad clearish for the top, then you're going to want to make sure you have a fusion rifle here in your energy slot. And I do recommend iterative loop. But because of our armor choice, I'm going to recommend at minimum you have a sidearm like Brigand's Law or Vantage Points. Anything that you can take advantage of with the way that your arc class is built. But Vantage Point for sure would be number one on my list. For the heavy, there are really only two options, even though you see 5 here. Number one, if you're going into a situation where you have barrier champs and you want to be able to stun them, putting on Darcy is going to give you the ability to pierce the barrier bubbles. Also, Darcy got a nice buff. You do a ton of damage with this thing when you hit precision hits. Now, the key factor here is that if you're going to be firing this at a boss, I would recommend doing it from a distance. Or if it's a situation where you can rally before seeing the boss, quickly switch it out for either the Queen's Breaker or the Queen Breaker or Thunderlord. But if you aren't going into a activity that requires you to deal with champs, I would recommend having the Thunderlord on at pretty much all times. It's going to synergize perfectly with your build. For the armor, your general mod is completely up to you. Just spec into whatever you need the most. You want to put on at least one harmonic siphon, and you want to have heavy ammo finder. The last option is going to be completely up to you. You can put on a siphon to match your kinetic slot weapon, or you can use virtually anything else to help you along the way. Be it another heavy ammo finder, a special ammo finder. You can also use dynamo, ashes to assets, or even hands-on. Or if you really want to be a great teammate, you can also put on power preservation, which gives you more orbs of power for your allies. Virtually all of these will be able to fit in this last slot. For the gauntlets, put on whatever general armor mod that you need to spec into most. I would recommend putting firepower and heavy-handed on. You're going to be cycling through your abilities at a relatively rapid rate, and you want to be able to proc the orbs of power so as to get your abilities back faster and get your super back faster, as well as proccing unraveling rounds for your strand weapon. This is just a filler. Put on fastball. Normally I would have a loader mod, but because I'm going to be amplified so much, it's really not even going to matter. The exotic chest armor piece, Raju's harness, or Raju's harness, depends who you ask. Activating Gathering Storm calls down lightning on all nearby targets, jolting them while also amplifying allies. Defeating arc debuff targets grants a small amount of Gathering Storm energy. Virtually everything that you do arc-wise is going to get you energy for your Gathering Storm. And Gathering Storm absolutely cooks this season. If you haven't tried Gathering Storm on Hunter yet this season, let this be your sign. Put it on and just go to town. Take it into Altars. Take it into Vanguard. Take it into Nightfalls. Take it into, heck, even take it into Gambit. It doesn't really matter. Gathering Storm is still one of the best one-shot supers in the game, especially for Hunter. It is extremely powerful, and with the artifact this season, the buffs to things like Jolt and arc abilities in general, you'd be missing out if you didn't at least give yourself an honest effort with it. For the general armor mods, you can put on whatever you want, and don't forget to max out the Artifice spot and get yourself a +3 to another stat. You want at least 2 elemental mods for damage resistance, and if you want extra ammo for your Thunderlord or your Darcy, you want to put on harmonic reserves. If you don't find yourself struggling for heavy ammo, you can always put on a 3rd resistance mod, whichever one that you prefer, based on the activity that you are going in. For the leg armor, the general mod, put on whatever you need to spec into most. By now, you're probably budgeting what you can put where, because you see now I'm using a 4 energy slot general armor mod, and that's going to be key in how you divvy out the mods between all 5 pieces. I recommend Insulation, Invigoration, and Absolution. The only caveat to this would be if you were going into the Nether Arena, I would swap out Insulation for Recuperation. The reason I would recommend swapping out Insulation is because it is your lowest cooldown ability. So you really don't need to get that extra orb of power to get it back any faster, but it just helps start your power cycle, if you will, when you do pick it up. But if you're going into the Nether Arena, absolutely swap that out for a Recuperation. For the cloak, put on whatever general armor mod that you need. I also recommend putting on Font of Restoration. Once you pick up 1 orb of power, your recovery will automatically jump up 35 points. So even if you are at a 0, you will get 35 points added to it. So you see I'm at a T3, just under a T4. When I pick up that first orb of power, I'm going to bump it up to 74 points, and that will last 10 seconds. Next, I would put up Outreach. And third, I would also put up Outreach or a Bomber. It is completely up to you. If you want to be more balanced, you can put a Bomber on there. That way you will be able to get your Outreach and your Bomber back, or yeah, you'll be able to get your melee and your grenade back faster, but it is completely up to you. You can also put on Powerful Attraction since you are going to be activating your class ability near enemies. It really just depends on how you feel it's going to best benefit you. For the artifact, in the first column, I have Unstoppable Fusion, Overload Machine Guns, and Anti-Barrier Sniper Rifles. Based on your weapon choices in each of those 3 slots, you're going to want to make sure that you select the appropriate mod to get the buff and the champion stunning capability that you expect. In the second column, Overclock and Load, while I'm amplified or at bolt charge, arc weapons gain increased handling and reload speed, and Unraveling Orbs, picking up an Orb of Power or a Tangle, grants strand weapons unraveling rounds. Both of those are going to be excellent options. In the third column, I have Photonic Flare, Dielectric, and Hold the Line. I have Hold the Line on here because most times I'm going to be running around with Thunderlord or a Legendary Arc Machine Gun. So I want to make sure that I get extra stability, reload speed, and the buff to healing with Final Blows. Dielectric, same kind of thing. Defeating arc to buff targets grants bolt charge. Rapidly defeating arc to buff targets spawns an orb of power and heals a small portion of health. Both of those first 2 options are going to give you health back, and you want to be able to get an extra orb of power as well as bolt charge. The Photonic Flare is a gamble perk that I have selected. Defeating an exhausted or severed target with arc damage releases a blinding burst. This is going to come into effect when you are not running solo. In other words, if you are running with teammates who may exhaust or sever targets, or if you get lucky and somehow sever a target just randomly, you're going to be able to release a blinding burst, which is going to be able to stun unstoppable champions. In the fourth column, Flashover, when you gain maximum bolt charge, you also become amplified. Lightning bolts deal more damage. Horde Shuttle, damaging unraveled targets with a weapon, occasionally spawns a Threadling. These 2 are going to work in tandem with extra tick damage. So given the weapons that I've put out there for options, these 2 are probably going to be the only 2 that you're going to want to select from this row. In the final column, I have Particle Reconstruction. Dealing sustained damage with fusion rifles or linear fusion rifles partially refills the magazine from reserves and grants them bonus damage for a short duration against the target. This is going to become particularly useful when you're using your fusion rifle against a champ. And then Defibrillating Blast, stunning a champion, grants maximum stacks of bolt charge, triggers an arc bolt that heals you, and jolts combatants that it damages. So that's a lot going on all in one little mod. You get the bolt charge from stunning the champ. It also triggers an arc bolt that heals you, and it jolts combatants that it damages. So when you're running an arc class, this is one of those non-negotiable mods that you can put on. Now, once we have Act 2 and Act 3 released, this could change, but as it stands right now, this is going to be your most powerful setup for the options that we selected. So that is the build. I'm going to take us into altars in a more scaled back setting so that you guys can see kind of how it's going to go for you guys, even in general content. You saw the intro video where I was just running around like crazy, and also the final numbers where you're going to be generating a ton of orbs of power on top of the kills that you're going to get. And that was with Darcy, by the way. That doesn't even count like if I'm using Thunderlord. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to roll with Darcy here just to start, and then I'll switch over to Thunderlord about midway through. But just kind of see, I'm going to go at kind of a slower pace for those that need it. This is, going to be more for those that are wondering how to use it in a more scaled back environment, or maybe get used to how to use this class or this build if you've never tried it before. So if you do find anything helpful with this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I want to say thank you to those that are members of my channel, as well as all my subscribers. Your support is amazing, and I really hope that you guys do check out this build in your own areas of Destiny, and I hope that it helps you guys along the way. So let's get on into altars, and we'll see how it goes. So I just spawned in to Altars of Sorrow. I'm going to start by cycling through my abilities and trying to give myself unraveling orbs, as well as give myself bolt charges, and also use my abilities to just make me amplified and generate a ton of orbs of power. Again, in a Nightfall setting, you know that the enemies are harder, and I was still generating a lot of orbs of power, a lot of damage, and honestly, it's really just going to come down to what you like using and how you want to go about it. But essentially, the way that this is built, it's going to force you to become a pretty well-rounded player as far as the and you see Darcy is just absolutely putting in work. But it's going to force you to be a player that cycles through your abilities, since you essentially only get one of each, if that makes sense. And you can see with virtually no effort, I've already got my super, which I airmailed and did not hit the nightmare like I was intending, but you get the idea. Orbs of power on the ground, and then the cycle starts all over again. And you can see that I'm not hurting for ability energy, because I'm constantly getting bolt charge, because I'm constantly generating orbs of power. I'm getting my abilities back through my ionic traces, and quite honestly, I'm not really hurting for anything. So anyways, that is the build. Let me know what you guys think. This can carry you through just about any content if you want it to. Just make sure that you have your weapons modded correctly, but otherwise you can take this into pretty much anything, including a raid or a dungeon, and just absolutely decimate your enemies of the Traveler. So if you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a hunter out there who is looking for a great build that can generate a ton of orbs of power, and if you were watching the lower left hand side of the screen, I'm sure you saw all the notifications of the orbs of power I was generating, please share this video with them or send them my way. I want to try to help as many people as possible. Thanks as always for your guys' support and good vibes. I'm going to be coming out with quite a few more videos since I put up that poll, so make sure you guys are on the lookout for those future videos. But I will see you guys next time. Take care, guys, and thanks again for your support.